Everyone, my name is Mohit Mantri and today I'm going to speak on the topic human reproduction, which is chapter 3 from NCERT class 12th biology textbook. So the content of this part is divided into two, part 1 and part 2, and in this video we will cover the part 1 of this chapter, which includes the male reproductive system, the female reproductive system, gametogenesis, which includes both the spermatogenesis as well as the oogenesis, and the menstrual cycle. And the rest of the topic, fertilization and implantation, pregnancy and embryonic development, and parturition and lactation will be covered in the other part. So let's begin. So in humans and various higher organisms, sexual reproduction takes place in which haploid gametes are formed inside the reproductive organ, and these haploid gametes then further fertilized or fused together to form a diploid zygote, and which develops into the whole organism. So these gametes formation in human takes place in testes and ovary respectively. So the male gamete, which is the sperm, develops in the testes, while the female gamete, which is the egg, develops in the ovary of the human. And the reproductive events in human includes first the formation of the gametes. This process is known as gametogenesis, and in which the sperm is produced in the male and ovum is produced in the female. Later on, this sperm is transferred into the female genital tract, and this process is known as insemination. And inside the female genital tract, inside the fallopian tube of female, the fusion of male and female gamete takes place. This process is called fertilisation, and because of the fusion of these two haploid cells, a diploid zygote is formed, and then the zygote undergo various cleavage as well as mitotic divisions and develops into a blastocyst, and the blastocyst then attached to the uterine wall of the female reproductive system. This process is called implantation, and later on the embryo development takes place inside the uterus, which is known as gestation, and at the end the delivery of baby takes place, and this process is called parturition. So let's begin with the male reproductive system. The male reproductive system consists of a pair of testes, which is the primary sex organ in which the gametes are formed. Along with that, there are few accessory ducts, accessory glands, as well as the external genitalia. In male, the accessory ducts include the retro-testis, vasa efferentia, epididymis, and vas deferens, and the external genitalia includes the penis. And male accessory glands include a pair of seminal vesicle, a single prostate gland, and a pair of bulbourethral gland. So this is the testis, this is the vas deferens, these are some accessory ducts, and this is the penis, and this is the further image of testis, including all the other accessory ducts. So testis, a pair of testes is the primary male reproductive organ, as already said, and each single testis is of around 4 to 5 centimeter into 2 to 3 centimeter in size, and it is located in a small bag-like structure which is situated outside and below the abdominal cavity, and this bag or sac-like structure is known as scrotum or scrotal sac. And the temperature in this scrotal sac is 2 to 2.5 degree lower than the normal body temperature, and this lower temperature is necessary for spermatogenesis, and this is the reason why testis is located outside the abdominal cavity. There is a condition which is known as cryptorchidism, and in which the testis does not descend and reach the scrotum, but it remains in the abdominal cavity at the time of birth. So what happens normally is that testes are present inside the abdominal cavity before birth, but at the time of birth they descend down via the inguinal canal into the scrotum and then remain outside the abdominal cavity. But if this does not happen, then this condition is known as cryptorchidism. Each scrotum is connected to the abdominal cavity through a passage which is called as inguinal canal. Now, each testis is divided into around 250 testicular lobules. These are the testicular lobules, and each single testicular lobules consists of either 1 to 3 highly coiled seminiferous tubule in which the gamete formation takes place. So each of the lobule has around 1 to 3 seminiferous tubules which are highly coiled in nature. The testis has 3 coats. The external coat is the tunica vaginalis, which is a parietal and visceral layer, followed by tunica albuginea, which is a dense white fibrous coat, and the innermost layer is the tunica vasculosa, which is a vascular coat which lines the testicular lobules. Now, each lobules contain the seminiferous tubule, and these seminiferous tubules together join and form a network of tubules, which is known as retrotestis. Now, retrotestis fuse to form 10 to 20 efferent ductule. So these are the efferent ductule, and these are known as vasa efferentia. Now, these vasa efferentia open into epididymis, which is located at the posterior surface of each testis. So this is the posterior surface, this, and this forms the epididymis. Now, the epididymis is highly coiled in structure, although this diagram does not show it as highly coiled for help us understanding the region, but in reality they are highly coiled, as you can see here in this diagram, and they can reach up to 6 meters long, and this epididymis is responsible for functional maturation of sperm. So the epididymis is divided into 3 parts. The first part is head of epididymis, then comes the body of epididymis and the tail of epididymis. Now, the epididymis further leads to vas deferens, and this vas deferens descend to the abdomen and loop over the urinary bladder and then reaches the urethra. So, this retrotestis, vasa efferentia, epididymis, as well as the vas deferens, these all forms the accessory ducts in male. Now, histology of seminiferous tubule. So, the seminiferous tubule of each testis is lined by 2 types of cell. One is the male germ cell, which is also known as spermatogonia, and the other is Sertoli cells. So here we can see this is the section of seminiferous tubule, and it consists of 2 types of cell. One is the spermatogonium or male germ cell, and other is the Sertoli cell. This is the Sertoli cell. Now, the male germ cell undergo meiotic division, which forms the sperm or the gametes. Now, Sertoli cell provide nutrition to the germ cells and to the developing sperms. Now, these Sertoli cells can also phagocyte the injured or the dead sperm cell inside the seminiferous tubule. And apart from the seminiferous tubule, there is some interstitial space which contains small blood vessels as well as some interstitial cell which are known as Leydig cell. And these cells secretes various testicular hormones which are called as androgen, and testosterone is the most important androgen in male. Then comes the penis. So penis is the external genitalia, and it is a muscular and a tubular organ in male, and it consists of various erectile tissue. There are 3 erectile tissue. One is the corpus spongiosum, in which the urethra is present, and there are 2 corpora cavernosa, right and left, and these together form the erectile tissue. Apart from that, the enlarged end of a penis is called the glans penis, and it is covered by a loose fold of skin called as foreskin or prepuce. Now, this glans penis consists of various sensory nerves, which sends the signal to the brain, and the parasympathetic impulses cause the release of a molecule which is known as nitrous oxide or NO, and this nitrous oxide is released inside the smooth muscle cells surrounding the blood vessel in the penis, and via regulating the enzyme guanylyl cyclase, they cause the dilation of the blood vessels, and therefore increased blood flow takes place inside this erectile tissue, which leads to the erection. Also, this parasympathetic impulse stimulates the urethral and verbourethral gland, and for releasing the mucus, which helps in lubrication. Now, after some time, sympathetic impulses are released, which causes contraction of vas deferens, and this process is known as emission. And due to the contraction of vas deferens, the sperm comes out from the vas deferens towards the urethra, and it also stimulates the contraction of prostate as well as seminal vesicle to release their secretion, and at the end, the ejaculation of the sperm takes place via the penis. Now, the accessory reproductive glands includes a pair of seminal vesicle. So, this seminal vesicle secretes a fluid which is known as seminal fluid, which is a lubricating, transparent, and jelly-like fluid, and it makes up 60 to 70% part of the semen. So here, this is the pair of seminal vesicle, and it releases seminal fluid, and the fluid is slightly alkaline and has a pH of around 7.3. It also contains fructose, which acts as the fuel for the sperm for their motility. Now, apart from fructose, there are some other compounds present in the seminal fluid, which includes the fibrinogen, prostaglandin, citrate, inositol, and several other proteins. Now, the function of prostaglandin is that it stimulates the cervix to take up to undergo peristaltic movement and take up more and more sperm towards the fallopian tube. Then comes the prostate gland. So the prostate gland is unpaired, that is single. As you can see here, this is the prostate gland, and it secretes a slightly alkaline prostatic fluid which is milky, thick, and sticky in nature, and it makes up the 30% part of the semen. Now, this fluid helps in the sperm activation, and it contains citric acid, calcium, phosphate, clotting enzyme, and fibrinolysin. Now, the function of this clotting enzyme is that it causes the conversion of fibrinogen into a fibrin coagulum, which holds the sperm in the deeper region of vagina and prevents their motility and therefore conserve the energy in sperms. And after some time, this coagulum is dissolved by the fibrinolysin, and then the sperms become highly motile. Then comes the Cowper's gland or vulvourethral gland. It is also present in pair. As you can see here, this is a pair of vulvourethral gland, and it secretes a slightly alkaline fluid and consists mostly of mucus, and this helps in lubrication. Now, semen is sperm plus the accessory reproductive gland fluid, and the volume of semen is around 3 to 4 ml, and it is slightly alkaline and has a pH of 7.5, and this alkaline pH is necessary because the sperms are active only in case of only in presence of alkaline pH. At high acidic pH, the sperm motility is highly reduced and the sperm begins to die, and therefore the alkaline fluid is required to neutralize the acidic region of the urethra caused by the flow of urine, as well as to neutralize the vaginal region, which is also acidic, slightly acidic in nature. Now, the normal sperm count in the semen is around 20 to 120 million per ml, and in condition which is known as oligospermia, the sperm count is reduced and is less than 20 millions per ml. And in case of azoospermia, there is either absence or near absence of the sperm in the semen. Then comes the female reproductive organ. So the female reproductive organ includes a pair of ovary, which are primary sex organ in female, along with a pair of oviduct, uterus, cervix, and vagina, and the external genitalia, and these are located in the pelvic region. So the oviduct or the fallopian tube, uterus, and vagina, they form the female accessory ducts, and the female external genitalia consist of mons pubis, labia majora, labia minora, hymen, and clitoris. So the pair of ovaries, which is the primary female reproductive organ, produces gamete in female, and each ovary is attached to the posterior layer of broad filament. So this is the broad filament, this bluish part, and it is known as peritoneal ligament. And the ovaries are almond in shape and 2 to 4 centimeter in length, and each ovary is covered by thin epithelium, which encloses the ovarian stroma. Ovarian stroma is the cavity inside the ovary, and the stroma is divided into 2 zones, peripheral cortex as well as inner medulla. Now, the female accessory ducts include fallopian tubes, a pair of fallopian tube, and each fallopian tube is around 10 to 12 centimeter long. And the part closer to the ovary is the funnel-shaped infundibulum. So this region is the infundibulum, and it is fimbriated. That is, it is having many finger-like projections which are known as fimbriae, and this helps in collection of the ovum during ovulation, which we will understand later. And the part medial to the infundibulum is called the ampulla. So this region, and this region is the infundibulum, and then here comes the ampulla, and the narrow part which is towards the uterus is known as the isthmus of the fallopian tube. So the fertilization takes place in the ampulla, and the last part is the isthmus, which has a narrow lumen and it joins the uterus. Now, uterus is single and it also known as womb, and the uterus opens into vagina through a narrow cervix. So this is the uterus and this is the vagina, and this narrow region is the cervix in between. Now the cavity of cervix is called as cervical canal, and along with the vagina it forms the birth canal. So this cervical canal as well as the vagina forms the birth canal through which the delivery of the baby takes place. Now the wall of uterus has 3 layers of tissue. The external thin membranous layer is the perimetrium. Then comes the middle thick layer of smooth muscle, which is known as myometrium, and then the inner glandular layer, which is known as endometrium. It lines the uterine cavity. So this is the uterine cavity and 3 layers of the uterus. Then comes the vulva, which is the external genitalia of female, and it includes mons pubis, labia majora, labia minora, hymen, and clitoris. So mons pubis is the cushion of fatty tissue which is covered by skin and pubic hair. So this top region is known as mons pubis, and it is fatty. It contains of fatty tissues. Then comes the labia majora. They are fleshy folds of skin and subcutaneous tissue which extend down from the mons pubis and surround the vaginal opening, and it is homologous to the scrotum in male. So this region, the outer lips, are known as labia majora. It starts from mons pubis and surrounds the vaginal cavity, and this forms the labia majora. Then below the labia majora, there are 2 thin folds of skin which is known as labia minora, and these are also known as inner lips or labia minora. Then comes the hymen, and the hymen is the opening of vagina, which is often partially covered. The opening of vagina is partially covered by a membrane, and this membrane is known as hymen. And this hymen usually breaks after the first coitus, but it is not a proof for virginity because the hymen will break due to several other reasons, such as physical activities, etc. And sometimes, even after the coitus, the hymen may not break. So it's not necessary, but usually it is that the hymen breaks after first coitus. Then comes the clitoris. It is the tiny finger-like structure which lies at the upper junction of the 2 labia minora above the urethral opening. So this is the urethral opening, and above that there is a small finger-like projection which is known as clitoris, and it is homologous to the penis in male. And this clitoris consists of the erectile tissue, and it also has many sensory nerves which send signals to the brain, and due to parasympathetic impulses, the NO, which is nitrous oxide, is released, and it causes erection in the erectile tissue of the clitoris. Now, the vulva has 3 openings. First is the urethral opening, which lies on the anterior end. Then comes the vaginal orifice, which lies in the posterior end, and then there are a pair of Bartholin duct and Bartholin gland on either side at the posterior region, and their opening is also released inside the opening is also present inside the vulva, and this Bartholin gland secretes slimy alkaline watery fluid which makes alkaline media in the vaginal passage and helps in the lubrication. Then comes the breast. This is a part of secondary sexual organ, and it is not primarily involved in the gamete formation or reproduction, but they are kind of accessory organ. And in female, a pair of mammary gland is present which contains the glandular tissue as well as variable amount of fat. So this is the glandular tissue surrounded by fat tissue. Now the glandular tissue of each breast is divided into 15 to 20 mammary lobes, which contains a cluster of cells which are known as alveoli. So these cluster of cells are known as alveoli, and these alveolar cells secrete the milk, and the alveoli then open into the mammary tubule. Now this mammary tubule of each lobe then further join together to form the mammary duct, and several mammary ducts join to form the ampulla. This wider region are known as ampulla, and then these ampulla are connected to a lactiferous duct through which the milk is sucked out. Now comes the gametogenesis, which is the process of formation of gamete. So it is it consists of two things: spermatogenesis as well as oogenesis. So let's talk about spermatogenesis first. So spermatogenesis is the formation of sperm. Now, initially, there are some primordial germ cells, and these primordial germ cells uh, in the embryo are determined to become the gonad cells. That is the cells of gonad of the male. And uh, so these primordial germ cells migrate to the testes during the embryogenesis and then become germ cells which are known as spermatogonia. So these are the germ cells which will undergo meiotic division to form the gametes. So these spermatogonia are also known as germ cells, and these are present inside the seminiferous inside wall of the seminiferous tubule. And initially they undergo several mitotic division and increase in number, and some of these spermatogonia will then cross the Sertoli barrier and will become primary spermatocyte. And these primary spermatocytes, so this is the primary spermatocyte, and these primary spermatocytes sites will undergo the meiosis. So when after puberty, the first meiotic division takes place, which develops into two secondary spermatocytes, which are haploid in nature and equal in size. And so two equal haploid cells are formed, which are known as secondary spermatocyte. Then these secondary spermatocytes undergo second meiotic division, which is the meiosis 2, to produce 4 equal haploid spermatids. So these 4 haploid cells are spermatids and they are equal in size. And later on, their differentiation takes place, and these circular spermatids are transformed into spermatozoa or sperm. So these are haploid in nature and these are all equal in size. And the spermatids are transformed into spermatozoa by the process which is known as spermiogenesis. And after spermiogenesis, the sperm head becomes embedded in the Sertoli cell, and later on, after they are mature, they are released in the seminiferous tubule, and this process is known as spermiation. So from each primary spermatocyte, after meiosis, there are 4 spermatozoa or spermatids, and therefore 4 haploid cells are produced from each meiosis cell. But this is not the case in female gamete formation, that is the oogenesis, which we will see later on. Now, 4 hormones are responsible for all this. The first is the testosterone, which is produced by the Leydig cell or the interstitial cell, and this testosterone is responsible for growth and division of the testicular germinal cell. So the growth of these germ cells, which is the spermatogonia, is induced with the help of testosterone. Then comes the LH. LH is the luteinizing hormone, which is a type of gonadotropin hormone, and it stimulates the Leydig cell to release testosterone and other androgen. Then comes the FSH. FSH stimulates the Sertoli cells for differentiation or differentiation of the spermatid to the spermatozoa, which is also known as spermiogenesis. And the Sertoli cells produce 2 types of enzyme, 2 types of hormone. One is the estrogen. So estrogen is also released in small quantity in male, and this is necessary for spermiogenesis. And other than that, Sertoli cells also produce inhibin hormone, which inhibits the release of the FSH hormone by regulating them negatively. So spermatogenesis starts at the age of puberty because there is an increase in the secretion of the gonadotropin releasing hormone. So the hypothalamus releases gonadotropin releasing hormone, and this stimulates pituitary gland, anterior pituitary gland, to secrete the gonadotropin hormones, which are luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, or LH and FSH. So this gonadotropin releasing hormone will act on the pituitary gland, and therefore LH and FSH will be secreted by the pituitary gland. Now the LH will act on the Leydig cell and will stimulate synthesis of the androgens, and most importantly testosterone. And when high level of testosterone are formed, is released in the body, it acts as a negative regulator to the hypothalamus as well as to the pituitary itself. So high level of testosterone will inhibit the pituitary to release the gonadotropin hormone, and will also negatively regulate the hypothalamus and will stop the release of gonadotropin releasing hormone. And the FSH stimulates the Sertoli cell, which helps in the spermatogenesis. And this Sertoli cell will now release inhibin, which will also inhibit the pituitary gland and will suppress the release of LH and FSH. So this is how the hormone regulation takes place in male. Now sperm. So after the differentiation of the spermatozoids, a sperm is formed and it consists of head, neck, middle piece and tail. So the sperm head contains a long elongated haploid nucleus, and the anterior portion of this head is covered by a cap-like structure which is known as acrosome. So this is the acrosome. The acrosome is filled with lytic enzymes such as which are called as sperm lysins, and most important enzyme is the hyaluronidase enzyme, and this hyaluronidase enzyme helps in the depolymerization of the hyaluronic acid polymer, which is present in the zona pellucida of the ovum. And after depolymerizing those polymer, calcium diffusion can take place inside the ovum. And because of that, cortical granules are released by exocytosis into the perivitelline space, and this prevents polyspermy or fusion of more than one sperm with the ovum. So after the head, then comes the neck region. The neck region consists of a proximal and distal centriole, and this centriole is donated to the ovum so that the ovum can undergo second meiotic division. We will see how that takes place later on. Then comes the middle piece, and it contains numerous number of mitochondria, and this mitochondria is necessary to provide energy for the swimming sperms. And then comes the tail, and this is each sperm contains a single flagellum, which is known as tail later on. And the chromatin in this sperm is highly condensed, even more condensed than the normal cell because of a protein which is known as protamine. So normal condensation of the chromatin takes place because of histone protein, and sperm contains protamine protein, which can further condense the chromatin into more smaller compact region. Now comes the oogenesis. So oogenesis is divided into three phases. One is the multiple phase, in which the primordial germ cell or the ovum mother cell mitotically divide to form large number of oogonia, and this process gets completed in the embryo stage. Then in the growth phase, the oogonia grow in size and form the primary oocyte, and this primary oocyte will later undergo meiosis to form the haploid ovum. Now maturation phase. So when the fetus is 25-year-old, all the oogonia which will be required in the whole lifetime is already produced by mitosis before the birth. So before the fetus is 25 weeks old, sorry. And so after all formation of all this oogonia, some of the oogonia will undergo first meiotic division, but will get arrested at the diploidine stage. So it will begin the meiotic division during the after the birth, but it will get arrested in the diploidine stage and cannot proceed further. But only during puberty, when release of gonadotropin hormones will take place, these oocytes will complete the meiosis 1 and form a large secondary oocyte and a small polar body. So unequal division takes place, which was not the case in case of male. So because of the meiosis 1, each primary oogonia will form primary oocyte will form a large secondary oocyte which contains almost all of the cytoplasm, and the other small polar body which will contain only the half of the chromatin material and a membrane. So this unequal division takes place, and this occurs after the puberty. Now these secondary oocyte will further proceed to undergo meiosis 2, but will get arrested at the metaphase stage of the meiosis 2. So this secondary oocyte will begin to perform meiosis 2, but will get arrested, and only after the arrival of the spermatozoa, this meiosis 2 will get completed, and again the secondary oocyte will undergo unequal division to form a large ovum and a small second polar body, and now this haploid ovum can fertilize with the sperm to form the zygote. So this is how the oogenesis takes place, and in this case, one meiotic division of the primary oocyte will lead to the formation of only one ovum, which is the gamete. Rest uh, polar bodies are formed, which are not useful and which are not necessary for gamete function. So from one meiosis, only one gamete is formed. Now, uh, so the ovary contains these follicles, and these are the oogonia cell, which are this ovum mother cell, are present in the cortex of the ovary. So the follicular cell surrounds the ovary, surrounds the ovum or the oogonia, and they form primordial follicles, and they protect the ovum. So the follicular cells form the ovarian follicle which will surround the ovum and protect it, and these ovarian follicle are known as primordial follicle, which consists of a single layer of the follicular cell. Now, during puberty, FSH and LH will be released. So, the gonadotropin will be released, which will stimulate the growth of these follicles to further primary, secondary, tertiary follicles. Now, FSH alone is required for the accelerated growth of 6 to 12 primary follicle each month. So, every month, because of the increasing the level of FSH, accelerated growth of 6 to 12 primary follicles takes place. The primary follicles is formed after when the membrane called zona pellucida appears between the follicular cell and the oocyte, and these follicular cells will proliferate to form several layers of cells, and will form the membrane granulosa. And now these follicular cells are also known as granulosa cell. So the membrane granulosa layer is formed, and the zona pellucida layer is formed between the oocyte as well as the other follicular cell. Now this primary follicle will 6 to 12 primary follicle each month will grow and will form layers such as theca externa and theca interna. So theca interna and theca externa will be formed, and now this follicle will be known as secondary follicles, and this thecal cell produces or secretes estrogen, and sorry, so estrogen will be released. Estrogen is released by this thecal cell of the follicles of the secondary follicle, and later on a cavity appears in the membrane granulosa, which is known as antrum, and this antrum is later on filled with the fluid, which also contains the estrogen, and these follicles are known as tertiary follicle. Now, all the growth up to tertiary follicle was stimulated by FSH alone. So the follicle stimulating hormone was responsible for the growth from primary follicle to tertiary follicle. Now, since estrogen is also released by the thecal cell, now the increased amount of FSH and estrogen will promote LH receptor on the surface of the follicles, and when the LH is also released, so estrogen and high level of LH will cause proliferation of thecal cell, and only one follicle will get fully mature each month. So initially 6 to 12 primary follicles were undergoing growth to secondary and tertiary follicles, but only one of them every month will finally become mature, and the rest, all the other follicles, will undergo atresia, that is, they will degenerate. And this mature follicle is called as Graafian follicle. So the fully formed ovarian follicle is known as Graafian follicle. So here we can see these are the primordial follicle, which is surrounded by a single layer of follicular cell. These later on form the membrana granulosa layer, which is several layer, and then a cavity which is known as antrum is formed, and this becomes fluid filled. So this is tertiary follicle, and later on only one of the follicle will fully mature and become the Graafian follicle. Now, at around 14th day of menstrual cycle, a process known as ovulation takes place, in which these Graafian follicle ruptures and the egg is released outside. So the ovum, surrounded by a layer which is known as corona radiata, formed by the follicular cell, is released during ovulation, and the rest of the follicular cells, the ruptured part of the Graafian follicle, becomes the corpus luteum, which appears yellow in color because of the pigment called as lutein. So this corpus luteum later on secretes important hormones such as estrogen and progesterone, and the ovum is released into the fallopian tube during ovulation. So initially, around 4 lakh follicles were present inside the ovary, but most of them degenerates, and at puberty, only around 60,000 to 80,000 primary follicles are left in each ovary. Now comes the menstrual cycle. So, first of all, four important hormones which are necessary for female reproductive development is estrogen. Estrogen helps in primary and secondary development of primary and secondary sexual characters in the female, and it also helps in increasing protein deposition as well as increased amount of BMR and slight increase in the fat deposition in female. Then comes the progesterone. Progesterone helps in preparing of the uterus for implantation of the fertilized ovum, and it also decreases the frequency and intensity of the uterine contraction to prevent the expulsion of the implanted ovum. And progesterone also promotes the secretion of mucosal lining of the fallopian tube. And apart from that, there are FSH and LH. So LH hormone is responsible for ovulation, that is release of the ovum from the Graafian follicle, and FSH is responsible for stimulating the follicular growth, which and after which and it also stimulates the estrogen secretion by stimulating the follicles. So now the menstrual cycle is divided into 3 phases. The first phase is the menstrual phase, and the first menstruation begins at the puberty, and the first menstruation is also known as menarche. And in female, the menstruation cycle is repeated every 28 to 29 days, and the cycle of event which starts from one menstruation to the next menstruation is known as menstrual cycle. Now, one ovum is released during the middle of each menstrual cycle, which is also known as ovulation. So the menstrual phase begins. Menstrual cycle begins with the menstrual phase, in which the menstrual flow occurs, and it lasts for around 3 to 5 days. So during this menstrual flow, the endometrial lining of the uterus is broken down, and all its blood vessels and other glands is broken down, and this forms the liquid which comes out through the vagina. So after the menstrual phase comes the follicular phase. Now this follicular phase is also known as estrogen phase or proliferative phase, because estrogen is an important hormone, plays an important role in follicular phase, and proliferative phase because proliferation of the follicle cells takes place and the follicle grow in size in case of follicular phase. So during this phase, the primary follicles in the ovary grow to become a fully mature Graafian follicle, and which stimulates the endometrium of uterus to re-epithelize through proliferation. So the thickness of endometrial wall in the uterus takes place during this phase, and these changes in the ovary and uterus are induced by change in the level of pituitary and ovarian hormone. So the pituitary hormone includes the FSH and LH, and the ovarian hormone includes the estrogen. So secretion of gonadotropin LH and FSH increases gradually during this phase, and it stimulates follicular development as well as the secretion of estrogen by growing follicles. So the level of FSH and LH is keeps on increasing during this phase, and this stimulates the follicular development. And once the follicles begin to develop, they release the estrogen, and later on this estrogen acts as the inhibitor for further increase in the level of FSH and LH. So the further secretion of LH and FSH is negatively regulated by the estrogen. But during the middle of the cycle, that is around 14th day, both the LH and FSH level attains a peak level, that is they are in the maximum level, and this rapid secretion of LH during the mid-cycle is known as LH surge, and this LH surge is responsible for the ovulation because this LH surge induces the rupture of the Graafian follicle and the release of ovum. So the phase before the ovulation is known as follicular phase. Then comes the ovulatory phase, which is also known as progestational phase or secretory phase. So this is the ovulation phase, and this is known as progestational phase because progesterone is the main hormone in this phase, and secretory phase because secretion of the estrogen and progesterone due to corpus luteum takes place, and also the secretory, also the glandular tissue of the endometrium develops in this case. So the corpus luteum secretes, corpus luteum is formed from the remaining part of the Graafian follicle, and this corpus luteum secretes large amount of progesterone, which is essential for maintenance of the endometrium, and this endometrium is necessary for implantation of the fertilized ovum later on. And now, if the fertilized ovum, if the fertilization takes place, the fertilized ovum enter the uterine cavity from the fallopian tube at around 3 to 4 days after the ovulation, and at around 7 to 9 days after ovulation, the ovum implants inside the uterine wall, and then the uterine secretion provides nutrition to the early dividing ovum. But now, if the ovum is not fertilized, then the corpus luteum, which was secreting the estrogen and progesterone, will degenerate. This will lead to decrease in the level of the estrogen and progesterone. Now, because of the loss of this hormonal stimulation, the wall of the endometrium, which was prepared for for the implantation of the ovum, will undergo necrosis, and so disintegration of the endometrium will take place, and all the superficial layer of the endometrium will get desquamated, and in case if the fertilization does not take place, and the menstrual fluid will be released, and this menstrual fluid is generally non-clotting in nature because of the presence of a protein, which is fibrinolysin, which prevents the clotting of the menstrual blood. And in human being, menstrual cycle ceases around 50 years of age, and this is termed as menopause. So hormone plays an important role in regulating this menstrual cycle. So as you can see, during menstruation, initially the menstrual flow takes place for up to 3 to 5 days, followed by follicular phase in which the endometrium lining is increasing, and then the luteal phase, which is also known as the secretory phase or the post-ovulatory phase. In this, the endometrial lining is filled with new blood vessels as well as secretory glands, and the endometrium is now ready to accept the fertilized ovum. And at the same time, during the follicular phase, the primordial follicle develop into primary, secondary, tertiary, and later on the mature or Graafian follicle. And then at the 14th day, the ovulation takes place, the ovum is released, and the remaining part becomes corpus luteum. And if the fertilization does not take place, the corpus luteum regresses, and therefore new cycle begins. Now the level of FSH and LH is important. So estrogen inhibits the LH and FSH. Estrogen acts as the inhibitor for the release of these hormones. So during the luteal phase, and also if progesterone is present, this inhibitory effect of the LH and FSH is multiplied. So during the luteal phase, when the level of estrogen and progesterone is very high, and also a hormone which is known as inhibin is produced by corpus luteum, which also inhibits the production of FSH. So in presence of progesterone, estrogen, as well as inhibin, the level of FSH and LH remains low because of the negative regulation via these hormone. But if this remains low. Now, initially also when the estrogen level begins to rise, in case of follicular phase, the level of FSH and LH is regulated and remains low. But for reason not yet understood, even at high estrogen level, during the ovulation, there is an almost 6 to 8 fold increase in the LH and around 2-fold increase in the FSH. And we don't yet know why even in the presence of high estrogen, this level of FSH and LH increase. But due to this sudden increase in the level of LH, the ovulation takes place. Now, as I said already, during the post-ovulatory phase, the corpus luteum will produce high amount of progesterone and estrogen, so the FSH and LH level will be low. Now, if the fertilization will not take place, the corpus luteum will degenerate or regress, and there will be a sudden fall in the level of estrogen and progesterone. Now, this fall in the estrogen and progesterone will now no more inhibit the level of FSH and LH. So the increase in the FSH and LH will again progressively begin during the new phase, which is the new menstrual cycle and the follicular phase of the new menstrual cycle. So this is all for the part 1. Now the further topics, which includes the fertilization and implantation, will be completed in the lecture 2. Thank you.